House Rule 11, the chair announced that she may postpone roll call votes at any time. Today, the committee is meeting virtually and in person. I want to announce a couple of reminders to the members about the conduct of the meeting. First, members attending remotely should keep their video feed on as long as they are present in the meeting, and members are responsible for their own microphones. Please also keep your microphones muted until you are speaking. And finally, if members have documents they wish to submit to the record, please email them to the committee clerk, whose email address was circulated prior to the meeting. Pursuant to notice, the committee meets to consider the following measures: H.R. 4609, the National Institute of Standards and Technology for the Future Act of 2021. H.R. 3858, the National Science and Technology Strategy Act of 2021. H.R. 4588, the Regional Innovation Act of 2021. And H.R. 4606, the Emerging Technology Transfer Act. And finally, H.R. 4599, the Steel Upgrading Partnerships and Emissions Reduction Act, or Super Act of 2021. Good morning and welcome to today's markup of 5 excellent bipartisan bills. All of these bills will help to ensure that our nation remains a leader in innovation. Importantly, these bills also help to ensure that the whole nation participates in the innovation economy and that the whole nation reaps the economic fruits of that participation. The first bill we will take up today is Representative Stevens and Walsh's National Institute of Standards and Technology for the Future Act. And I'm proud to co-sponsor this bill, and I want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for their thoughtful engagement and enthusiastic support for this critical agency. The NIST for the Future Act is a comprehensive 5-year reauthorization for the agency. These accounts fund important measurements, and technology research, as well as NIST extramural manufacturing programs. The bill would also support NIST's infrastructure needs at a time when many of its buildings are in poor to critical condition. In total, the legislation authorizes $7.9 billion over 5 years, allowing for growth that is both ambitious and sustainable. These investments are necessary to support a critical federal agency charged with helping to advance U.S. competitiveness and innovation. The next bill that we will consider is H.R. 3858, the National Science and Technology Strategy Act of 2021. I want to thank Representative Walsh and Ross for their work on this legislation. This bill directs the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP, to undertake a comprehensive review of the nation's innovation landscape. The bill also directs OSTP to use this analysis to develop a national science and technology strategy. The next bill that we will be considering is H.R. 4588, the Regional Innovation Act of 2021. I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Wild and Baird, for their important work on this legislation. Over the last few decades, much of the science and technology funding and capacity in this country has been concentrated in a few cities and regions. This bill would establish programs at both the Commerce and Energy departments to address this imbalance. It will create more shared prosperity from our federal R&D dollars by creating regional technology and innovation hubs across the country. And next, we will consider H.R. 4606, the Emerging Technology Transfer Act. This bill is an updated version of a bipartisan bill that I and Representative Fleshman introduced last year. It authorizes programs and funding to support the Department of Energy technology transfer activities. These activities are critical to bringing the fruits to our public investment in clean energy research, development, and demonstration projects into the hands of America's communities. The bill also includes provisions to support the next generation of innovators, inventors, and entrepreneurs. And I want to thank Congresswoman Ross and Congressman Meyer for leading this important piece of legislation. The last bill on the roster today is the Steel Upgrading Partnerships and Emissions Reduction Act, which is sponsored by Representative Gonzalez and Representative Lamb. This bill authorizes a program at the Department of Energy to advance technologies that will help reduce emissions from the steel manufacturing sector, allowing American steel manufacturers access to an advanced and innovative technologies will ensure that the domestic steel manufacturing industry will remain competitive through the 21st century. I look forward to a productive markup today, and I now recognize our ranking member, Mr. Lucas, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson, for holding today's markup. The bills we're considering today are a continuation of the important and bipartisan work we've been doing on American scientific competitiveness. Last month, the House overwhelmingly passed our legislation to redouble our investments in the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy Office of Science. These bills are the cornerstones of our blueprint to build up America's research and technology enterprise. Today, we're filling out the blueprint with the rest of the elements needed to shore up the nation's technological success. First among those is reauthorizing the National Institute of Standard and Technology. NIST is the most important government agency that most Americans have never heard of. As industry's laboratory, NIST's work to promote U.S. innovation supports roughly half of our gross domestic product. NIST gives businesses the measurement science, standards, and guidance they need to produce exceptional products that can be globally competitive. The NIST for the Future Act invests in the emerging technologies needed to drive progress, including cybersecurity, quantum sciences, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. It also prioritizes scientific and technical research services, expands our support for American manufacturers, and upgrades outdated NIST facilities. Finally, it prioritizes our participation and leadership in international standard-setting bodies. As new technologies grow and spread, it's critical that we are able to influence the standards and specifications that guide their development. This investment in NIST will go far to support American competitiveness and expand the resources available to American businesses. I want to thank Chairwoman Johnson, Chairwoman Stevens, and Ranking Member Walsh for working with me on this important bill. Next, we'll consider the National Science and Technology Strategic Act by Representative Walsh. This bill creates a strategic whole-of-government approach to research and development, ensuring better coordination between federal agencies and a more strategic plan for achieving U.S. research and development goals. Additionally, the bill requires the President to submit an annual report to Congress on national research priorities and activities, as well as global trends in science and technology, including potential threats to U.S. scientific leadership. A competitive, strategic approach to American research and development is more important now than ever, especially as we pass legislation to increase our investments in our federal scientific enterprise. This bill ensures we are regularly reviewing and updating our research priorities so we're maximizing taxpayer dollars and investing in the most critical areas of technological advancement. Following that, we'll debate H.R. 4588, the Regional Innovation Act. This bill establishes innovation hubs across the country, ensuring technological development isn't limited solely to the coast. I talk a lot about the value of taking advantage of talent across America and giving diverse communities a chance to contribute to important scientific work. This bill guarantees that we build out our technological capacity as we are driving innovation in geographically diverse areas, with at least 1/3 of the newly created regional innovation hubs in rural or underserved areas. Next up is H.R. 4606, the Energizing Technology Transfer Act. This legislation is an important complement to the DOE Science of the Future Act because it helps turn the discoveries we make from basic research into useful technologies that the private sector can commercialize. Finally, we'll consider H.R. 4599, the Steel Upgrading Partnerships and Emissions Reduction Act, or the SUPER Act for short. This bill is from Representatives Anthony Gonzalez and Connor Lamb. Will support R&D into clean steel production use. This will help reduce carbon emissions while supporting American manufacturing and production. Together, these 5 bills address key components of American competitiveness. They were all developed with extensive stakeholder input through a bipartisan process. They're all intended to catalyze our scientific growth. The threat we face from China is real and growing every day. It threatens American jobs, cybersecurity, and national security. But our plan to ensure our competitiveness is not about top-down planning, like the Communist Chinese Party. It's about coordinating our own strengths, bringing together all federal agencies and all sectors of the U.S. innovation economy together to coordinate and ensure that the oxen are pulling the cart in the same direction. The bills we're considering today, along with the NSF for the Future Act and DOE Science for the Future Act, represent a thoughtful vision for American science and technology development that is strategic, comprehensive, and importantly, workable. I'm very proud of the work this committee and our staff has done, and I'd like to thank all my colleagues, particularly Chairwoman Johnson, for the work that went into these bills. I'm eager to mark them up today and pass them out of committee. I believe we have a strong starting point for a competitive legislative package on American competitiveness, and I look forward to finalizing our policies into law. And with that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now consider H.R. 4609, the NIST for the Future Act, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 4609, a bill to reauthorize the National Institute of Standards and Technology and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to be recognized to speak on this underlying bill?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
The chair recognizes Ms. Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is certainly an exciting moment for this committee. Some might say a pinch me moment as we get ready to mark up the NIST reauthorization, the NIST for the Future Act, H.R. 4609, a bill that I am so proud to have introduced that will direct long overdue investments in one of the most important and relevant agencies to our nation's innovation and enterprise and economic capabilities. I certainly want to thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Ranking Member Lucas, as well as the ranking member of the Research and Technology Subcommittee, Mr. Waltz, for joining me in introducing this legislation to reauthorize NIST. As we reflect, NIST is a critical agency that supports U.S. competitiveness by advancing measurement, science, standards, and technology. NIST does essential work in supporting important industries of the future, including artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and biotechnology. And it makes improvements in cybersecurity across the nation. The agency has also played a critical and essential role in dozens of activities that are less attention-grabbing, but just as important. NIST reference materials, technical standards, measurement and calibration services, and technical guidance help validate the safety and function of most of the objects around us in both our homes and our businesses. The work helps us track and understand contaminants in our water and our air and helps us construct buildings that are more resilient to natural hazards. As Congress considers a significant package of legislation to advance science and technology and bolster U.S. competitiveness, it must not overlook NIST. Congress has not reauthorized this agency since 2010. And in that time, its budget has only grown modestly and little has been done to modernize it. But yet NIST has the capability to do more with less. And the incredible workforce that comprises NIST, not only in Gaithersburg, but also in their outposts across the nation, is truly of note and remarkable. The bill authorizes a significant but sustainable increase in NIST budget to ensure the agency can boldly advance industries of the future while continuing to invest across all its important areas of research. We are looking at specifically the development of activities in advanced communications, artificial intelligence, biometrics, cybersecurity, engineering biology, greenhouse gas measurement, privacy, and so much more. The funding and programs authorized through this legislation will enable the agency to better support U.S. industry, jobs, and advancing American interests in international standard settings across the world. It will also address long-standing challenges that have slowed the agency's work, like its maintenance backlog and inflexible authorities. The NIST for the Future Act continues to strengthen and grow NIST's important extramural programs, the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and the Manufacturing USA Network. The bill bolsters the Manufacturing USA Network by authorizing funding for 2 new competitively selected institutes. We know that NIST is on the forefront of our semiconductor chip shortage crisis that is deeply impacting industries across America, including our beloved automotive industry. The new institutes have created tremendous value, not only since they were authorized, and this is within Manufacturing USA, but during the nation's toughest times. We know that the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Centers have played a role in addressing the impacts of COVID-19. They have worked with 90 partners throughout the country to connect supply chains and keep our essential workers safe and implement safety components that were new to the time. I am so proud of this bill and the transparent, bipartisan, and deliberative process that continues to make it even better. Thank you to every single person on this committee for being a part of this bill, but I also want to urge all of you to support it here today. I'm going to ask Madam Chair for unanimous consent to submit to the record letters of support for the NIST for the Future Act from IBM, the Telecommunications Industry Association, the Security Industry Association, the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, which is part of the NIST coalition, and of course, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Barrett is recognized. I'm sorry, Mr. Waltz is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And thank you for holding today's markup, considering these important pieces of legislation. First up is a bill I'm very proud to be an original co-sponsor with Chairwoman Stevens, and you can certainly hear and see her passion for these bills. And I want to thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Lucas, for working with me on HR 4606. The National Institute of Standards and Technology for the Future Act of 2021. Frankly, I don't think a lot of members fully understand, and a lot of Americans fully understand how critical NIST is to what we do in our everyday lives and to our economy. Interestingly, NIST is the only federal research agency whose authority comes directly from the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution grants Congress the power to, quote, fix the standard of weights and measurement, unquote. And since 1901, it has been in the forefront of setting the standards for weight and measurements in the United States and the world. Almost every federal agency and the U.S. industry sector uses the standards, measurements, and certification services that NIST labs provide. These services provide the foundation for the fairness and efficiency of sales in the U.S. and around the world, underpinning nearly half of the U.S. economy. NIST contributes to countless products and services. They enhance our national and economic security, improve Americans' quality of life. And for example, thousands of law enforcement officers' lives are saved as a result of NIST-developed standards for ballistic-resistant body armor. As a veteran of the Army and within the Army, nearly 60,000 different types of equipment regularly require NIST calibration tests to ensure their systems perform properly on the battlefield. The NASDAQ relies on NIST's Internet Time Service to timestamp billions of dollars worth of stock trades and other financial transactions every business day. Currently, NIST is playing a critical role in my home state of Florida by leading an investigation into the collapse of the Champlain Towers in Surfside, Florida. The American people, and especially the residents of Surfside, and especially the families of those that we've lost, need answers and deserve answers on how this tragedy took place. And through this investigation, we will gain an understanding of how this happened, how to prevent tragedies like this in the future. I look forward to supporting Representative Chris' amendment, of which I'm also a co-sponsor, to ensure this study is fully authorized as part of this bill. I was recently at the Surfside collapse, and I just cannot, words cannot convey how devastated that community is, and frankly, how scared many of the residents in the surrounding buildings are. So we need answers, and I look forward to supporting that. Also important to Florida, especially during hurricane season, are building codes to ensure resilience to wind and flooding events. NIST assists the International Code Council with providing modern codes and standards to mitigate damages from natural disasters. NIST research is a key component to positioning U.S. and technology at the leading edge of innovation. This legislation ensures that NIST has the world-class research facilities and expertise necessary to properly contribute to the industries of the future, including quantum science, cybersecurity, AI, advanced communications, and engineering biology. The bill builds on congressional investments in domestic semiconductor manufacturing, or the CHIPS Act, that we signed into law in the National Defense Authorization Act. We are currently seeing a global chip shortage. The average new car has over 1,000 chips. We in the United States, we in the West, cannot be reliant on the Chinese Communist Party for semiconductors that are essential to modern defense systems and electronics. NIST cybersecurity research and training programs are also vital to protecting the nation from the cyber threats that we are facing today. Its cybersecurity technical standards and risk management frameworks are widely regarded among the best and most comprehensive around the world. Finally, this bill also directs NIST to develop guidance for research universities in adopting a cybersecurity framework for properly assessing and addressing cybersecurity vulnerabilities across their campuses. So thank you again, Chairwoman Stevens, Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Lucas, for working with me on this important piece of legislation, ushering this bill through the Science Committee on a bipartisan basis. NIST work is the foundation on which U.S. competitiveness grows, and this legislation makes the necessary investments to ensure we can combat the challenges coming from our adversaries like the CCP. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to be recognized to speak on this? Mr. Foster.
I'd like to strike the last word.
Recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I would like to thank Subcommittee Chair Stevens for introducing this crucial bill, and to the Chair and Ranking Member for their support of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Last month, this committee worked together on a bipartisan basis to provide a substantial increase in science funding for the DOE Office of Science and for NSF. And today we have the opportunity to build on that great work by providing increased funding for NIST, whose work undergirds almost all technology, including new innovations that will arise from the newly authorized spending at NSF and the DOE Office of Science. If we wish to continue to encourage scientific advancement and discovery across the U.S., all sections of our federal science infrastructure must be properly funded, and this legislation puts us one step closer to that goal. I'd like to take a moment to talk about one important piece of NIST's mission that often gets overlooked, which is developing standards for secure digital identification. The lack of a secure way for individuals to authenticate themselves online and offline has left us open to identity theft, financial fraud, and without the means to distinguish fraudulent from legitimate online activity. And the lack of a secure digital ID is a key cybersecurity vulnerability that's been flagged again and again and again. Incidents of identity theft and identity fraud continue to rise in the United States, where identity theft is at an all-time high, with over 1.3 million reports of consumer identity fraud to the FTC in 2020 and tens of billions of dollars of fraudulent or mistaken payments by the federal government. The inadequacy of current systems of digital identity degrades our security and degrades privacy for all Americans, and next generation solutions are needed to improve both security and privacy. So I'm proud to have my Strengthening Digital Identity Act essentially incorporated into this bill to address this problem. My bill directs NIST to create robust standards and guidance for the implementation of digital identification. NIST's work in identity research and standards is one of the best in the world, and given that adversaries continue to exploit weaknesses in our digital identity systems to conduct successful cyber attacks, additional NIST resources are needed to help government and industry secure people's identity in cyberspace. Digital identification is a long overdue and a necessary tool for the United States economy to transition into the digital age while preventing fraud, ensuring privacy, and improving equity. A privacy-preserving and secure digital identity would allow Americans to sign up for government benefits, make a withdrawal from their bank, or view their medical records, or dozens of other uses, all with near zero risk of identity theft or fraud. Reducing identity fraud would not only provide tremendous savings to individual consumers and businesses, but it would also create massive savings for our government. However, it's important to get this right, and this legislation is an important first step in ensuring that NIST keeps us ahead of the curve in establishing standards and guidance for a safe, secure, and privacy-preserving digital identification. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation and yield back.
Thank you. Anyone else seeking recognition? Okay, we will now proceed with the amendments in the order that's on the roster. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentlelady from Michigan. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1, amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Ms. Stevens of Michigan.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading and without objection, so ordered. I recognize Ms. Stevens for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am yet again pleased to offer this bipartisan amendment in the nature of a substitute for the National Institute of Standards and Technology for the Future Act. This amendment makes a few important adjustments to the underlying bill to increase the construction account within NIST to ensure that we are investing in our research and development infrastructure. Based on Department of Commerce standards, roughly 60% of NIST facilities are in poor to critical condition, and the agency has over $800 million in deferred maintenance projects. Addressing this maintenance backlog is long overdue and will ensure that NIST is well equipped to meet our innovation challenges of today and tomorrow. The amendment also includes a bipartisan provision led by myself and Congressman Meyer to create a pilot program of expansion awards for MEP centers to provide services for workforce development, resiliency of supply chains, and more. Within this provision, the bill authorizes a historic increase in funding for the MEP program to $275 million, as requested by President Biden in his budget earlier this year. We know that the MEP program produces incredible return on the federal investments we are making here today. For instance, the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, the pride and joy of Michigan's 11th district, located in Plymouth, has helped its small and medium manufacturing clients create and retain over 42,000 jobs in the past 10 years. So I thank my colleagues for their bipartisan partnership on this amendment. I urge them to support it. And at this time, Madam Chair, I will yield back.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Bonamici.
I move to strike the last word and speak in favor of the amendment nature of the substitute.
To recognize 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson, and thank you to Subcommittee Chairwoman Stevens for this bipartisan bill and amendment in the nature of a substitute. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, serves an essential role in strengthening our nation's competitiveness in innovation, science, and technology. And I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor of the NIST for the Future Act to scale up the authorities and resources NIST needs to carry out its mission. The events through the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrate why the agency's work developing standards and strengthening manufacturing is so important and in need of more robust investments. As our communities struggled to find access to personal protective equipment to stay safe, it was a responsibility of our nation's manufacturing supply chain to remain resilient and rapidly transition to in-demand products and also address workforce development shortages. And that's a place where NIST is so important. For example, in my home state, the Oregon Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or OMEP, has been forming the local partnerships needed to make these nimble decisions. For example, they worked with Speed Rack West, a warehouse shelving manufacturer in North Plains, Oregon, after the pandemic resulted in a significant loss in the business's revenue. OMEP helped Speed Rack West brainstorm and connect with consultants on manufacturing and other materials to help provide workers and their business with economic certainty during a challenging time. With OMEP's help, Speed Rack stayed open through the pandemic and also broadened the scope of their business. Manufacturing jobs are changing with the future of work and significant changes in our economy, particularly as we transition to clean energy resources. Strengthening investments in the Manufacturing USA Network and the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership is an important step to make sure that businesses and workers will be prepared. I look forward to working with my colleagues to advance this important NIST reauthorization. Again, would like to thank Chair Stevens, Chairwoman Johnson, and Ranking Member Lucas for their leadership. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment in the nature of a substitute and the underlying bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. McNerney.
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word on the AINS to HR 4609.
Recognize 5 minutes.
Well, I'm pleased that we're considering comprehensive legislation today to reauthorize NIST, and I believe this amendment will strengthen the bill. NIST's work is critical to ensuring our nation's competitiveness across a wide range of different areas of science and technology. As someone who worked with standard-setting bodies before being elected to Congress, I highly value the work that NIST does, and I believe that it's important that we have a robust agency that is equipped with the necessary resources. That's why I'm generally very supportive of the AINS. But I do have some concerns about Section 210, the Advanced Communication Research section, that I would like to raise, specifically with respect to the National Advanced Spectrum and Communications Test Network provisions. I want to make sure that we address any potential overlapping roles that could result with NIST and NTIA, that we're allocating resources efficiently, and that we don't undermine the NTIA's agency's mission. Chairwoman Johnson, would you work with me, with NIST and NTIA to address potential concerns before the bill goes to the floor?
Yes.
Chairwoman Johnson, I thank you for that, and I appreciate your willingness to work with me, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to? Yes.
I move to strike the last word.
Recognize 5 minutes.
I'd like to echo the comments of my colleague about the concerns with Section 210 of this bill. The problem is that we're creating essentially duplicative responsibilities between NIST and the TIA with respect to this kind of research. And I believe that we have an obligation in government to be as efficient and as clear as possible when we're authorizing this kind of research. The problem is that the ITS right now, in their authorizing legislation in federal code, it specifically says that they're supposed to be the central federal government laboratories for research on transmission of radio waves. And Section 210 of this bill, it's currently written, seems to create a duplicative responsibility within NIST. So I'm very supportive of this legislation. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and our ranking member for the bipartisan way that you've conducted this. But I hope that we will keep these concerns in mind as this bill moves forward in the House. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Let me say that the committee sought input from a lot of stakeholders in the development of the legislation, including from NIST itself. Committee staff also shared texts with Energy and Commerce committee staff and made such changes in response to their feedback. Unfortunately, on the executive side, the lines have become somewhat blurred between NIST and NTIE. Responsibilities in the area of advanced communication technologies and testing. The administration's own budget requests did not provide the clarity that we hoped for. We've been in touch with the Department of Commerce seeking greater clarity. They informed us just yesterday that they hope to have that to us in the next few weeks. But I'm unable to turn around specific T&A in the time for the markup today. But I do commit to working with my colleagues who serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee and with the administration to refine the language in our NIST bill as needed going forward. Let me thank you for calling that to our attention. Any further comments? Well, we're going to delay the vote on the substitute until later, and we'll now go to Representative Christ's amendment, the next amendment on the roster.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 2, amendment in the amendment of the nature of the substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. Christ of Florida and Mr. Waltz, Posey, Jimenez, and Webster of Florida.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. So ordered. I recognize the gentleman now for 5 minutes, Mr. Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the early morning hours of June 24th, Champlain Tower South in Surfside, Florida, unexpectedly and tragically collapsed, claiming the lives of far too many. I immediately called for a full investigation into that collapse to get to the bottom of why this happened and figure out how to prevent it from happening again. My amendment seeks to do just that. This amendment authorizes $22 million for the National Institute of Standards and Technology to investigate the condo collapse in Surfside, find the source of failure, issue recommendations on how to prevent future collapses, and inform building codes for similar structures. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has the experience and knowledge to conduct investigations of major building collapses. The agency has examined failures ranging from the World Trade Center collapse to post-disaster investigations following hurricanes and wildfires. In fact, the National Institute of Standards and Technology is already on the site at Surfside. However, the agency has indicated that it needs an additional resources of $22 million in order to complete a full investigation. I want to thank my Florida colleagues and bipartisan co-sponsors of this amendment, Mr. Waltz, Mr. Posey, Mr. Jimenez, and Mr. Webster for their support. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to my friend and colleague, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for her work and leadership in the wake of this disaster. Through our role on the House Appropriations Committee, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz and I were able to secure funding and report language for fiscal year 2022 to support the investigation at Surfside. I can't stress enough how instrumental the Congresswoman's experience and leadership was in that effort. Taken together, that report and this amendment will give the National Institute of Standards and Technology the resources and direction it needs to get to the bottom of this horrific tragedy and identify ways to prevent another similar disaster from occurring. Because no family should ever have to endure a tragedy of this magnitude, I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Anyone else seeking comment?
Madam Chair.
You recognize.
Madam Chair, I just, again, would like to thank my colleague, Representative Chris, and the other co-sponsors for their leadership. And I just can't emphasize my call that no American should have to worry about their loved ones or themselves safety sleeping in their homes. I was able to visit the pile, as it's called, in Surfside. I just want to publicly and on the record thank the first responders, many of which were out there for day after day, hour after hour, on their hands and knees in full protective gear in 95 to 100-degree Florida heat, on their hands and knees, combing through each piece of rubble looking for their fellow Americans. I especially want to thank our state CFO and Chief Fire Marshal Jimmy Petronas and his team, and the first responders from many of our states, from all over the country, that descended on that site. I look forward to seeing this investigation through, and I have to tell you, it was incredibly eye-opening and disturbing to see so many others in all of the surrounding buildings petrified to go back to their homes, to sleep at night. Every crack, every chip of concrete that they saw thought, in their minds, thought that indicated to them that their building could collapse too. So I look forward to get to the bottom of it. And again, Representative Chris, I thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you. Any further comment? Time.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jimenez is there.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Menez.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I also want to thank Mr. Chris and all the other co-sponsors of this amendment. Although this is not in my district specifically, I did serve as the mayor of Miami-Dade County, and Surfside is in Miami-Dade County. I also want to thank all of the first responders that were there and through this very difficult time, the tremendous work that they did. From the fire departments to FEMA urban search and rescue teams, their work was extraordinary. All the local officials, the governor's office, CFO Petronas, they all did an extraordinary job. As my colleague, Mr. Waltz, has said, there are many people that live in Miami-Dade County that are not resting easily today, that live in these high-rise condominiums all up and down the coast. And they want to make sure that their building is safe. And I think that this investigation is vitally important to find out the root cause of what happened here, why this building collapsed, and then make the necessary changes and recommendations to codes to make sure that this never happens again, and also give a peace of mind to those that live in high rises, not just in South Florida, not just in Dade County, but throughout the nation, that their building is indeed safe. And those that are not safe, that need to be rectified before tragedy like this happens. Yesterday, they found the remains of the last unaccounted for individuals, so that brings the death total up to fatality total up to about 98. And it's a huge tragedy in my hometown. And again, I want to thank Mr. Chris and all the other co-sponsors of this amendment. It's something very much needed in Miami-Dade County, but also around the nation. Thank you, and I yield my time back.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment is Mr. Caston's amendment. The clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 3, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. Caston.
The clerk will report the amendment. I'm sorry, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading and without objection shall order. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment includes technical corrections to the ANS and has language that incorporates feedback from the Environmental Protection Agency to strengthen the greenhouse gas measurement research activities authorized in Section 202 of the NIST for the Future Act. As a member of the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis and as someone who, prior to coming to Congress, spent 16 years running clean energy companies with a mission to profitably reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it is safe to say I have dedicated my life to fighting the climate crisis. And whether you're in the business world or in this line of work, we can only do that if we accurately and consistently measure our greenhouse gas emissions. This amendment will ensure that greenhouse gas emissions measurement research activities authorized in this bill are done in cooperation with agencies like the EPA and NOAA so that NIST can best leverage the expertise of the scientists across our federal research enterprise. The EPA has a unique role in greenhouse gas emissions monitoring given the inventory of U.S. greenhouse gas emission sources and sinks, all capitalized, that's a title, that it operates. So it's important to include their expertise in the development of standards for measuring greenhouse gas emissions. This amendment would also help facilitate the EPA's ongoing work in greenhouse gas emissions reporting and ensure that studying the attribution of greenhouse gas emissions to the underlying activities and processes causing them is a key priority of the Center of Excellence that is established in this bill. Finally, the amendment would also clarify that NIST's development of measurement standards takes into consideration any standards and guidance that currently exists at the national or international level. I thank my colleagues for their patience and respectfully ask for their support of this common sense amendment that would enhance and improve the already impressive greenhouse gas emission measurement research component of this bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentlelady from North Carolina. She's recognized to offer her amendment. Ms. Ross.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 4, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Ms. Ross of North Carolina and Ms. Kim.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading and without objection so ordered. I recognize the gentlelady for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I introduced a bipartisan software supply chain security amendment to HR 4609, the National Institute of Standards and Technology for the Futures Act of 2021 with Congresswoman Kim. This amendment would require the director of NIST to coordinate with academia, industry, and federal agencies to develop security practices and outcomes to enable software developers to manage cyber risks over the full life cycle of software products. Over the past decade, there have been at least 138 software supply chain attacks or vulnerability disclosures. One glaring example was the Russian state-sponsored SolarWinds cyber attack in 2020, which compromised government, industry, and nonprofit information. These attacks are very expensive to manage, as they often involve paying ransom, restoring backups, and rebuilding systems. This amendment will direct NIST to take an active role in conducting outreach and coordination with our agency and industry partners to prevent or mitigate the impact of future cyber attacks. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and the underlying bill, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, and he's recognized to offer that amendment.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 5, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. McNerney of California.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objections to order, and I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain this amendment.
Well, I thank the chair. This amendment would enable NIST to establish test beds for examining security, safety, and reliability of artificial intelligence and machine learning systems. NIST would work in coordination with other federal agencies, the private sector, the higher education institutes to establish test beds program. As co-chair of the AI caucus, a key priority for me is identifying policies that we can adopt to promote deployment of more secure and reliable AI systems. AI systems pose unique security risks, and these systems don't always work as intended. This could cause real harm to the public. That's why it's critical we have virtual testing environments where entities that are building and using AI systems can test their systems to identify potential vulnerabilities that may result in malfunction, failure, or cyber attacks. These test beds will also complement the committee's important work on AI from the last Congress, specifically the National AI Initiative Act, which was enacted as a part of last year's NDAA. I urge all of my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Anyone seeking recognition? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by myself, and the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 6, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Ms. Johnson of Texas and Mr. Feenstra of Iowa.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense of the reading without objections to order. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. The Organization of Scientific Area Committees, or OSAC, was stood up by NIST in 2014 to address the lack of discipline-specific forensic science standards. OSAC has contributed to progress in many forensic disciplines, but there's much work yet to be done. Just last week, they announced that they were going to draft new standards for collecting physical evidence from victims of sexual assault. Normally, NIST partners with non-governmental standards development organizations, such as the SDOs, in the development of new voluntary consensus standards. They don't typically manage the consensus process themselves. However, in the case of forensic science standards, there's simply no business model for an SDO to take this on. It is a public policy imperative, not a commercial one. It's time to formalize this role to remove any uncertainty without the future of this effort. My amendment would codify the OSAC, specifying requirements for the overall structure and processes of the OSAC. The amendment emphasizes broad stakeholder participation and input, scientific integrity, and transparency. This amendment text has long been part of my Forensic Science and Standards Act. We have continued to update it with diverse stakeholder input. I have been disappointed by our inability to move the legislation forward, even after we reported out of committee on a bipartisan basis last Congress. The NIST for the Future Act is another opportunity for us to try to move forward on at least a part of this important issue. However, even as I seek to include my amendment today, I recognize that we have more work to do with the stakeholder community to build consensus around the specific details of the text. It is essential that those on all sides of this issue, the scientists, the practitioners, the legal community, the advocates for wrongfully convicted, all have a voice. and it is essential that OSOP process be transparent from the beginning to end. We're only going to be successful in strengthening the science in our nation's courtrooms if we have widespread trust in the process that yields these standards. I want to thank Representative Feenstra for joining me and co-sponsoring this amendment. Our state university is doing very important work in forensic science and standards through its management of the NIST Center of Excellence for Forensics. I will continue to advocate for those and other forensics research efforts across the federal science agencies. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back. Is there further discussion? Mr. Feenstra.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson, for allowing me to co-sponsor this amendment with you. And thank you, Ranking Member Lucas, for your supportive words. I support this amendment because of the importance of forensic science and how it can aid law enforcement. The organization of scientific area committees for forensic science strengthens the nation's use for forensic science by facilitating development and promotion of the use of high-quality technical standards. This helps ensure that forensic analysis is reliable and has the support of medical examiners and law enforcement forensic labs. The brave men and women in law enforcement are often asked to do seemingly impossible tasks like bringing criminals to justice using what evidence they have to gather. Improving the technical standards of forensic science helps our police officers, medical examiners, and other investigators bringing guilty criminals to justice. I support our law enforcement officers and the sacrifices they make to keep us safe. The many officers across my district take pride in finding the truth, and we are extremely proud of their work. I want to ensure that they have the best tools and techniques available to them to help with this difficult, important work they've dedicated themselves to. Relating back to the forensic science in my district, we are proud to have Iowa State as the headquarters for the Center for Applications for Forensic Evidence. CSAFE is a research center committed to applying statistical and scientific methods to improve the accuracy of forensic evidence. I have had the pleasure of speaking with their faculty and their amazing things that CSAFE is working on. They collaborate with statisticians, scientists, forensic practitioners, and their partner universities that include Iowa State, Carnegie Mellon, UC Irvine, West Virginia, University of Virginia, and Duke. This amendment will help them with their incredible work by improving standards and including a grant section that is intended to cover CSAFE and NIST funding for forensic studies. For these reasons, I ask others members of this committee to please support this amendment. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson and Representative Feenstra for offering this amendment and continuing our bipartisan work from last Congress on the Forensic Science Research and Standards Act. Forensic science is playing an increasingly large role in our criminal justice system. It's critical that we have scientific, consistent, and robust standards and guidelines for the use and analysis of forensics. This amendment authorizes the incredible work already being done in this area by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I want to thank the stakeholders for working with us on this language, in particular, the Consortium of Forensic Science Organizations, which supports the amendment. The consortium represents the crime labs, medical examiners, and toxicologists, the practitioners in the field we rely on these standards and guidelines to do their work at the highest level of accuracy and integrity. Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to submit a letter from the consortium for the record, please.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the chair noted, we recognize that we have more work to do to address other stakeholders' feedback. I support this amendment, and I look forward to working with the chair and our stakeholders through the process to finalize this language. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? The vote then will occur on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Fletcher. You're recognized to offer the amendment.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have an amendment at the desk, and it's because what we know today
The clerk will report the amendment.
are used in everything from the fabric in our clothing to the preservatives that keep our food fresh. They play an integral role.
Let the clerk to report the amendment and you'll be recognized.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Amendment number 7, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609 offered by Ms. Fletcher.
Without objection, we offer unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection to order, and I recognize the gentlelady for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Used in everything from the fabric in our clothing to the preservatives that keep our food fresh, chemicals play an integral role in our everyday lives. In our fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, we've relied heavily on preventative measures like frequent hand washing with soap and sanitizers and products to keep our surfaces clean and disinfected. It's hard to imagine life without these chemical innovations, but if not used responsibly, they can have a harmful effect on the environment and on human health. So sustainable chemistry is an approach to chemical innovation that allows society to meet environmental, human health, economic, and societal needs without compromising the health and safety of future generations. Rather than focusing on cleanup and control of waste and hazardous materials, sustainable chemistry emphasizes redesigning industrial products and processes to reduce or eliminate hazards at their source by reducing toxicity, quantities of waste, and energy consumption. Sustainable chemistry is creating jobs, supporting economic development, and keeping U.S. companies competitive around the globe. Despite strong interest in sustainable chemistry from the private sector, there are still barriers to the design, development, and commercialization of sustainable chemical products and processes. This is partly a lack of investment into research and technology development and a lack of support for integration into existing industrial processes. Another challenge is the absence of widely recognized definitions for sustainable chemistry or methods for measuring the sustainability of a chemical product or process. So to address this, my amendment directs NIST to carry out activities in coordination with industry, with academic institutions, and with nonprofit institutions in support of sustainable chemistry, and to advance new technologies and methodologies to facilitate sustainable chemistry innovation and its widespread adoption in the private sector. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there is no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado, the spaceman. He is recognized to offer his amendment, Mr. Perlmutter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 8, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609 offered by Mr. Perlmutter of Colorado.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objections to order. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the chairs and the ranking members, thank you for bringing this bill forward. It's very important. My amendment is simple. It allows NIST to use the Facilities Modernization Fund created in the bill for construction and maintenance needs at its Joint Institute campuses. We have one of these joint institutes at my alma mater, the University of Colorado at Boulder, and that is called JILA, the Joint Institute for Laboratory Astrophysics. JILA is one of the nation's leading research institutes in physical science. Its scientists explore some of the most challenging questions about quantum technologies, X-rays, interaction of light and matter. In fact, Jilla and the University of Colorado have produced at least 3 Nobel Prize winners, Carl Wyman and Eric Cornell, for their work on the Bose-Einstein condensation. And I was going to have Dr. Foster and Dr. Baird tell us what the Bose-Einstein condensation experiment was. And Dave Wineland, who is an expert in quantum systems. But just in case my friends from Texas, Dr. Babin and Mr. Weber, think that Colorado and the University of Colorado is all science and no play, I want you to know that Flora Duffy, a CU Boulder grad, won the triathlon last night in Tokyo. So, we do a little bit everything in Colorado. Now, back to my prepared remarks so that NIST is benefited by my comments here. In addition to its groundbreaking research, Jilla offers training programs for our future researchers and innovators and has helped create over 250 Colorado quantum jobs. Unfortunately, the labs at NIST Joint Institutes, like Jilla, are over 50 years old and are insufficient to support today's research needs. Current labs lack sufficient electric power, suffer from excessive vibration due to aging mechanical systems, and are unable to maintain stable temperatures and humidity control. Functional and modern facilities are essential to the work being done at our joint institutes and to the U.S.'s research and innovation enterprise. My amendment will help NIST support the institutes like Jilla continue their important work in physics, astrophysics, biophysics, physical chemistry, optics, electronics, and quantum mechanics. The infrastructure investments in this bill are critical towards our future innovation and competitiveness, and I hope all my colleagues, including Dr. Babin and Mr. Weber, will support my amendment to help ensure these investments can occur both at NIST campuses and at NIST joint institutes across the country. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and with that, I yield back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone dare to add a discussion? Ms. Bonamich.
I just want to thank Mr. Perlmutter for taking up space on this committee, and I yield back.
Anyone else? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Lamb. He's recognized to offer his amendment.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 9, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. Lamb of Pennsylvania and Ms. Moore.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense of the reading without objection so ordered. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Many of us have talked a lot of times about the need to broaden who has access to the pipeline of scientific research and educational funding in this country. And so my amendment would simply add minority serving institutions and community colleges to the education and research provisions of this bill. But it would also do something that's a little more simple and practical, but I think very profound, which is put resource dollars in some of the places where people are really discovering the most important facts about technological advancement. And I know that's a little broad, so I want to say what I mean specifically. We have at our community college in Allegheny County in Western Pennsylvania, for example, a program called Mechatronics. And it's one of the programs that really integrates robotics, AI, electrical engineering, energy usage, and manufacturing all in one. And the people who come out of this 2-year program are very highly sought after, very well paid, because every single day they're discovering how to manufacture things with robots and different sources of energy and computer assisted intelligence and all that kind of thing. If we invest in those types of places and those types of programs, which you don't always have at a 4-year university because they're not as flexible. CCAC could create a mechatronics program because the employers just came to them one day and said, we need you to design something for what we need. If we put our dollars there, we're going to make a lot of discoveries about how to integrate all these different systems and how to manufacture things in this country in a much more efficient way. And I think that is the goal of the NIST for the Future Act, is to be kind of ruthlessly practical in the way that we use our dollars and get societal returns on them and outcompete our competitors overseas. So I thank you. I want to especially thank Representative Moore for co-sponsoring this amendment, and I urge everyone to vote for it. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Kim, and she's recognized to offer amendment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 10, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mrs. Kim of California.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection, so ordered. And I recognize the gentlelady for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. My amendment is also very simple. It would encourage the NIST director to develop educational collaborations and outreach with non-traditional educational organizations such as nonprofits and professional associations to engage underrepresented communities in STEM education. Currently, NIST has the authority to support, promote, and coordinate activities and efforts to enhance public awareness and understanding of measurement sciences, standards, and technology with industry, academia, and other community groups. But NIST lacks the authority to include nonprofits and professional associations in their educational outreach efforts. The recently confirmed National Cyber Director has also noted the overall shortage in meeting workforce demands across both the public and private sector. This amendment broadens the capability of NIST to make meaningful contributions towards the cybersecurity challenges by leveraging the expertise of nonprofits and professional organizations. So I urge my colleagues from both sides of the aisle to support my amendment and provide NIST with another tool to improve their educational outreach and practices with underrepresented communities. I also want to take the time to thank my colleague, Representative Ross, for working with me to offer another amendment that will strengthen our cybersecurity efforts by enabling software developers to share technical expertise with federal agencies, industry stakeholders, and standards development organizations. Just between 2019 and 2020, our country saw a 400% increase in cyber intrusions. So I'm very troubled by the increase of cyber attacks, which seem to be designed not only for monetary purposes, but also to instill distrust in our economic system and our institutions. So I want to thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, and he's recognized to offer his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have an amendment at the desk. I'm okay with that. Might want to read the amendment.
Just do it however you want. We can.
Okay.
13, excuse me, 26.
Go ahead.
We'll come back. Okay. You're out of order, Madam Chair, and I don't, it doesn't, I mean, I'm easy if you want to go ahead with somebody else.
However you want to.
But I'll be glad to do it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to HR 4609 offered by Mr. Babin of Texas.
Thank you very much. When we authorize new spending on new programs to invest in our science and our technology, we must make sure that it is protected. We know that our foreign adversaries are building their technological success on the basic research developed in the United States and around the world. We've even seen the infiltration of Chinese influence in our university systems, our businesses, our agencies, and in several different occasions at even our top institutions. We must work to ensure that foreign nationals do not undermine our open system of research. That's why I'm very pleased to be offering this amendment, which will require the GAO to conduct an audit of NIST research security measures. It is critical that all of our federal agencies have advanced security protocols to fight undue foreign influence. I hope and encourage all of my colleagues here today to support this amendment so that we can ensure all of the resources necessary are implemented to secure our systems and to mitigate our threats. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this amendment? Hearing none, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. You know what I said? Yeah. There's an amendment at the desk for Mr. Posey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609 offered by Mr. Posey of Florida.
The clerk will dispense for the reading and the so as the audit, and Mr. Posey recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. I have a long explanation and a short explanation. Which one do you think my colleagues would prefer? Okay. This reaffirms the importance of including open and transparent attributes when NIST participates in voluntary consensus-based international standard bodies that will also include participation from the Chinese firms and the state-owned enterprises of the People's Republic of China. And I urge support of the amendment. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to have time? Okay, I recognize myself to speak on the amendment. It should not be a surprise that I have reservations about this amendment. I join my colleague from Florida in his concerns about China not adhering to international norms and rules, including in standards development. I am very cautious about legislating something with unintended consequences in standards development. It's certainly complicated. That said, I appreciate that Mr. Posey has already incorporated helpful changes recommended by NIST. And even with those changes, we've heard from several companies and industry groups that remain concerned that this could unintentionally harm the U.S. leadership in some international standard-setting bodies. Given Mr. Posey's willingness to work with us and with NIST, I plan to accept this amendment today. However, I want to make sure we continue to work with the stakeholders going forward to refine the text as needed. I thank you and yield back. Any further comments? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Okay. We got a little confused here in these notes, so we're getting back on schedule. Oh, if there's no further discussion occurred on this amendment, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. We're back now to Mr. Babin's second amendment on the roster, and Mr. Babin of Texas is recognized to offer the amendment.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will
13.
report the amendment.
Amendment number 13, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. Babin of Texas.
Thank you. As we emerge from a year that crippled thousands of companies nationwide, it's imperative that we provide all the tools and resources necessary for American businesses and manufacturers to bounce back and fully recover. The National Institute of Standards and Technology for the Future Act authorizes a pilot program within the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership program to support expansion awards focused on technology demonstration, supply chain security, cybersecurity, and workforce training here in the United States. The MEP program is a resource available in all 50 states and Puerto Rico that provides custom services to small and medium-sized manufacturers to help them enhance their productivity and technological performance. This program and more than 1,400 trusted advisors gives manufacturers an opportunity to better enhance their businesses and maintain a competitive edge, which is so necessary today. Because of the importance of this program and the desperate need for its services across the country, I'm pleased to be introducing an amendment today that will help ensure all funds designated for MEP specifically focus on supporting and building up U.S.-based manufacturing companies. Our nation needs this now more than ever, and we cannot afford for this money to be spent on manufacturers operating outside of the United States who don't provide American jobs or fuel our economy. I encourage all my colleagues here today to support this amendment, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? If there is no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 14, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. Tonko of New York.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. The NIST for the Future Act is critical to the advancement of science, technology, economic competitiveness, and the well-being of our nation. I am grateful for the opportunity to propose a friendly amendment to this important bill. Our nation's plumbing infrastructure is based in large part on data generated nearly a century ago. It is no wonder that newly built plumbing systems are often inefficient and ill-suited for current plumbing fixtures and appliances. Most often, the impact of these inefficiencies can be felt in costly repairs and wasted taxpayer dollars. But poor plumbing data and widespread overestimation of water demand can also pose serious health hazards. When more water is supplied than necessary, it remains trapped in the plumbing system and allows harmful bacteria to grow and contaminants to enter the water. My amendment will bring U.S. plumbing standards into the 21st century by investing in research that will make our plumbing systems more reliable, more water efficient, and most importantly, safer for everyone. With that, I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Meyer. He's recognized to offer his amendment.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 15, amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4609, offered by Mr. Meyer of Michigan.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. My amendment today would create a national supply chain database that is established through the director of NIST and managed through the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. Each state supply chain database is maintained by NIST recognized MEP centers, which will complement this national database. It's been nearly 18 months since the COVID-19 pandemic shut down our economy, schools, and normal way of life. And within just weeks, it was clear that we face significant vulnerabilities in our supply chain. From life-saving medical supplies to raw materials to support our manufacturing construction industries, we are facing critical shortages that threatened our day-to-day. We cannot allow these disruptions to exist in the future. My amendment ensures that the federal government and industry sectors have an accurate and real-time view of our supply chain and the United States manufacturing capabilities for critical products. This tool will help safeguard our economy from future disruptions, and I'm proud to support this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to do so today as well. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Now, the vote on amendment in the nature of a substitute. We will now vote on the amendment in the nature of the substitute as amended. The vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. A reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report HR 4609 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table, and I ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. And members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplementary, minority, or additional views on the measure. Now we'll have a 5-minute recess before we begin the next bill.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
HR 3858, a bill to establish a national science and technology strategy, a quadrennial science and technology review, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to be recognized to speak on the underlying bill?
Madam Chair, I wish to strike the last word.
Mr. Waltz is recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson, again, for holding today's markup and for the opportunity to speak on the National Science and Technology Strategy Act. I was honored to introduce this legislation earlier last month with Representative Ross, yourself, Chairwoman Johnson, and Ranking Member Lucas. As we all know, investing in research and development is essential to maintaining U.S. competitiveness globally and protecting our national security. However, as we as a Congress increase our investments in R&D, we need to ensure our taxpayers' dollars are spent strategically and effectively, which is why it introduced the National Science and Technology Strategy Act. This bill requires the Office of Science and Technology Policy and the National Science and Technology Council to develop a national science and technology strategy every 4 years. Establishing a whole of government approach for R&D planning by increasing coordination amongst federal agencies ensures everyone is on the same page when it comes to our R&D goals and the path we will take to achieve these goals. Equally important to the strategy is that this legislation requires an assessment of potential threats to U.S. scientific leadership. Over the years, we have seen our adversaries, especially the Chinese Communist Party, threaten U.S. security in various ways, often targeting our R&D with research theft and espionage. Our scientific community plays an important role in our national security, and we must ensure they know what upcoming trends and threats to look out for. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to mark up this bipartisan bill today, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Ross.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word.
Ms. Ross is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. HR 3858, the National Science and Technology Strategy Act of 2021, is a bipartisan bill introduced with the leadership of Congressman Waltz, yourself, and Ranking Member Lucas. The U.S. government has an unrivaled R&D enterprise, but it is spread across more than a dozen federal agencies, and so inefficiencies in cooperation could lead to the U.S. falling behind in key areas such as artificial intelligence, climate research, and cybersecurity. This bill directs OSTP to complete a comprehensive quadrennial review that will provide an overview of the nation's innovation landscape and provide policymakers, industry, researchers, and other stakeholders with unbiased data and analysis to identify the future needs, barriers, and opportunities for U.S. science and technology. Leadership in science and technology is essential, but it requires a whole of government approach like the one outlined in this bill. We use similar cross-cutting strategies in agencies like defense, homeland security, and energy. I believe it is critical that we treat the federal R&D enterprise with the same approach. I'd like to thank Congressman Waltz for his leadership on this issue, and I look forward to working with him to see this bill across the finish line. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further requests for time? Are there any amendments? Hearing no amendments, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report HR 3858 to the House with the recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to consider is laid on the table. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplementary, minority, or additional views on the measure. Next, we will now consider H.R. 4588, the Regional Innovation Act of 2021, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 4588, a bill to amend the Stevenson-Wilder Technology Innovation Act of 1980 to establish a regional technology and innovation hub program and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendments. Does anyone wish to be recognized to speak on the underlying bill?
I do, Madam Chair.
Ms. Wild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last week, I was joined by my Science Committee colleagues, Representatives Baird, Bowman, and Gonzalez, in introducing H.R. 4588, the Regional Innovation Act of 2021. This bipartisan bill is an important piece of the Science Committee's contribution to a larger competitiveness package that will create good-paying jobs across the country in communities like mine, Pennsylvania 7. In recent decades, our high-tech industries and the economic growth they bring have become increasingly concentrated in a relatively small number of cities and regions. A 2019 report from the Brookings Institute found that nearly a third of the total high-paying technology jobs in the U.S. are concentrated in just 16 counties. In the 4 decades since 1980, the top 10 metro areas in the country saw their earnings grow by nearly 60% more than everywhere else in the country. For the United States to remain globally competitive, we must address this geographic imbalance in economic growth. By promoting shared prosperity and the gains from science and technology funding and the industries of the future, we can also address some of the root causes of the increasing social and economic disparities in our country. And by looking to the skills and creativity of researchers, entrepreneurs, and workers in areas like the Greater Lehigh Valley, my home district, we can secure our nation's leadership in pressing needs like semiconductors, cybersecurity, and advanced manufacturing with a Made in America approach. A number of our federal agencies have long been supporting programs to boost the innovation capacity of cities and regions across the country. However, as economic growth has become more concentrated, so too have federal R&D dollars. I was pleased to see President Biden include a bold new initiative in the American Jobs Plan to expand the geographic diversity of U.S. innovation. The Senate included a thoughtfully developed authorization for this proposal in the U.S. Innovation and Competitiveness Act. The legislation we are considering today builds upon the Senate proposal with a bigger focus on inclusion and shared prosperity in underserved communities across the nation. H.R. 4588 would authorize a program at the Department of Commerce to designate and support regional technology and innovation hubs across the country. It would use a merit-based competitive process to bring together consortia consisting of local and state governments, universities, industry, labor organizations, and other groups to promote innovation in a region tailored to that region's strengths and opportunities. The program would include funding for both planning and implementation of regional strategies. The legislation focuses on 4 types of activities: workforce development, technology maturation, entrepreneurship support, and infrastructure. Importantly, the legislation ensures that voices that have often been left behind in the innovation economy have a real seat at the table for both planning and implementation. A total of $6.85 billion over 5 years is authorized for this program. HR 4588 would also create a regional clean energy innovation program at the Department of Energy to link regional economic development with clean energy innovation activities. A total of $250 million over 5 years is authorized for this program. The legislation ensures that the programs at the two agencies will coordinate each other and with federal programs focused on manufacturing. I want to thank the many individuals and organizations who provided thoughtful input to this legislation. I also want to thank my colleagues for the good amendments they will offer today to further strengthen the bill. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further requests for time? Mr. Baird.
Hello and good morning, Chairwoman Johnson, the Ranking Member Lucas, and all the other members of this committee. Last week, I was proud to join my colleagues and introduce HR 4588, the Regional Innovation Act, which is a bipartisan effort to support regional innovation hubs all across the United States. And in order to strengthen America's status as a world leader in innovation, we must invest in the future and eliminate economic roadblocks that stand in the way of progress. Our legislation establishes a new grant program within the Economic Development Association for regional innovation to create planning grants for innovation hubs and phase 1 and 2 awards to create innovation ecosystem hubs. These would exist in a partnership with state, local, and regional governments and educational institutions like Purdue University in creating and sustaining research hubs. I have recently spent time back home in my district visiting with Hoosiers who are excelling in their innovations and their ideas. Programs like this would benefit them and so many others who would receive connections and support from these hubs, even while they're located in rural America. The state of Indiana has earned a national reputation for its innovation, and I'm proud to introduce legislation that supports the continuation of Hoosier ingenuity and domestic advancement across the United States. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Any further requests for time?
Ms. Stevens.
Ms. Stevens is recognized.
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
You recognize.
Thank you. I'd like to take a few moments to applaud my colleagues, Congresswoman Wild and Congressman Baird, for their leadership on our Regional Innovation Act of 2021. This is a step in the right direction for our country and will exercise some of the existing assets and programmatic activities within the Department of Commerce to ensure that we are developing and innovating and promoting intentional regional economic development strategies across this country. As a former EDA official and someone who has seen similar programs in action and has also helped to work with on-the-ground stakeholders, I know the importance of these programs all too well. And both of my colleagues were right to talk about their home region, their home district. In Michigan, we share a very similar story with our regional assets. And as stakeholders back home heard about the coming of this legislation, they started emailing and saying, how can we get qualified to become a regional innovation hub for our technology, our advanced manufacturing, for automotive, and the diversification that comes within this industry? And so I do urge my colleagues to all come together and support this legislation. It is bipartisan. It is certainly syncing up with the moment we find ourselves in. A lot of the fact finding that we got from stakeholders around this country, which is saying, hey, we don't want to leave people behind. We don't want to overlook any of the innovation capacity potential of this country. And by making it competitive, right? It's not top down, it's bottom up. This really will position our country for success and allow us to compete globally and to continue to create the jobs of today and tomorrow. So again, with that, I really do want to applaud Congresswoman Wild for her leadership and Congressman Baird for his, and urge my colleagues to vote yes. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. Any further requests for time? We will now proceed with amendments. The first amendment on roster is the manager's amendment to be offered by myself. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1, amendment to HR 4588 offered by Ms. Johnson.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection, so ordered. And I recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. This manager's amendment makes several technical and conforming changes to the bill. It also adds necessary context to certain terms used throughout the bill. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Is there further discussion? Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. I move to strike the last word.
You recognize for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Many of the effects of the climate crisis are regional, which is why we need regional solutions. In Northwest Oregon, for example, we recognize the tremendous potential of marine energy, but those same resources are not accessible in landlocked states. Regions differ in energy resources, markets, and innovation ecosystems. Federally funded research and development has not always reflected state and regional capabilities and market needs. To successfully deploy clean energy resources on a massive scale, no later than mid-century, and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we must harness and align local, state, tribal, regional, and national solutions. Federal investments should help connect regional governments with academia, businesses, and clean energy stakeholders to help clean energy innovation in the post-research stage thrive on a regional scale and meet market needs. In 2016, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine released a report highlighting the value of regional partnerships to advance clean energy development and commercialization. The report called for regional energy innovation and development institutes, or REIDs, and as the report states, to spur the development of both early stage innovations and innovations that show appropriate promise. As part of Mission Innovation, the Obama administration had proposed funding to support regional innovation partnerships. Last year, I introduced my Regional Clean Energy Innovation Act to build on these recommendations. I look forward to working with Congresswoman Wild and Chairwoman Johnson and all of our colleagues to incorporate some of the provisions from my bill in the Regional Innovation Act of 2021 as it advances as part of the larger competitiveness package. Our transition to a clean energy economy will require a coordinated and sustained federal investment in innovation. And I'm pleased that this committee is taking an important step in advancing those goals with this bill today. I'd like to thank Congresswoman Wild, Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Lucas, and Representative Baird for their leadership. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I look forward to working with them as it moves forward, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bowman. He's recognized to offer his amendment.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 2, amendment to HR 4588 offered by Mr. Bowman of New York.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. So ordered. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to begin by thanking Representatives Wild and Baird for introducing this incredibly important piece of legislation. As we tackle the challenges of the 21st century, our collective innovation and ingenuity can take us to new heights as a nation. And there is no doubt that in the process, we will create jobs and build wealth in every community in the United States. But we also need to be intentional about how and where we support the research and industries that are going to set us up for success. We need to devote special attention to unlocking the brilliant potential of communities that have been left behind, whether it's small rural communities that are suffering from depopulation and neglect, or formerly redlined parts of our cities that are struggling with disinvestment. The Regional Innovation Act of 2021 is based on that understanding, and it will allow us to create technology hubs across the country that serve the needs of all people and the planet we share. At the same time, each one will be designed to meet the unique local needs of its community. An innovation hub would be transformative for districts like mine, New York's 16th, where pockets of poverty are as high as 30%, and where we also have a growing network of green energy entrepreneurs of color. Building community wealth is a key goal of this bill, and my amendment seeks to reinforce that goal in a few different ways. If we want to democratize our economy and create new industries in a way that brings everyone in, one of the best ways to do so is to put employees in the driver's seat by giving them ownership and decision-making stakes in the companies where they invest their time and talent. My amendment encourages that model, as well as cooperative business in general. We should also seize the opportunity to create entire ecosystems of small business around these technology hubs, so that the hubs are genuine anchors of their communities. My amendment clarifies that local procurement is a crucial tool in this regard, and that mission-oriented financial institutions like CDFIs and minority lenders can play an important role in supporting such business ecosystems. Finally, in offering this amendment, I am pleased to find common ground with my colleagues across the aisle, as well as those who represent rural communities. From rural electric co-ops to farmer cooperatives, some of the most exciting examples of economic democracy come from rural parts of the country, and my amendment highlights that expertise. I urge and encourage my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment?
No.
Hearing none. The vote then occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentlelady from New Mexico, and she's recognized to offer amendment, Ms. Stansberry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 3, amendment to HR 4588 offered by Ms. Stansberry.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentlelady for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start by thanking Representatives Wild and Baird for this important bill to boost the innovation capacities of cities and regions across the country. Initiatives such as these are essential to advancing U.S. competitiveness. However, I am concerned that the United States lacks the fundamental data infrastructure and analytical capacity to ensure that the critical technology investments, such as those in this bill, really realize our national goals and potential. As this committee heard from Dr. Erica Fuchs during her testimony during a research and technology subcommittee hearing in June, inadequate data and analytic capacity has weakened our decision-making regarding critical technologies, supply chains, and infrastructure. While existing surveys such as the Annual Survey of Manufacturers provide yearly glimpses of U.S. capabilities, these surveys are not helpful when tracking supply chains during a rapidly evolving crisis such as the COVID-19 pandemic. We also lack the mechanisms to track the flow of capital into and out of communities across the country. And most of all, we lack a full picture of the nation's R&D initiatives. This amendment ensures and establishes a new data analytics program at the Department of Commerce focused on critical technologies, innovation, and production capacity. The program would serve as a federal clearinghouse for the collection, analysis, and dissemination of data, And furthermore, it would support national policy and decision-making in the public and private sector to ensure that the U.S. remains the global leader in technology and innovation sectors. This amendment authorizes $100 million over 5 years to accomplish this task and gives the Secretary flexibility to integrate it into existing data capabilities at the department rather than creating duplicative administrative functions. The need for intellectual foundations, data infrastructure, and analytics to support technology decision-making is growing. The opportunities to leverage these technologies to address our needs as a nation and the challenges is also growing. Developing such a data and analytics capacity will support the Regional Innovation Initiative authorized in the underlying bill, and it will support science and technology investments across the federal government. If the U.S. is to remain competitive, we must analyze and understand the factors that enable our competitiveness, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further requests for time on this amendment? There's no further discussion. The vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. If there are no further amendments, a reporting quorum is being present. I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report 4588 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the bill is reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table, and I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplementary, minority, or additional views on the measure. We now have H.R. 4606, the Emerging Technology Transfer Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 4606, a bill to establish programs and authorities to facilitate the commercial application of clean energy and related technologies in the United States.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any time. Does anyone wish to be recognized to speak on the underlying bill?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move to strike the last word.
Ms. Ross is recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. H.R. 4606, the Energizing Technology Transfer Act, is a bipartisan bill I introduced with Congressman Mayer, and this bill will allow universities and private sector companies to capitalize on the Department of Energy's research to accelerate the commercial application of clean energy technologies. U.S. universities and small businesses like North Carolina State's Clean Energy Technology Center in my district lead the world in clean energy research and innovation. Yet too often they do not receive the federal support, financial or otherwise, they need to thrive. This bill will go a long way toward boosting that support. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be recognized?
Madam Chair, move to strike the last word.
Mr. Baird.
Mayor.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson, for holding this markup today and for providing us with another opportunity to work together on legislation to harness our country's incredible innovation potential and boost our global competitiveness. I was honored to be part of this committee's successful effort to support and modernize the Department of Energy's Office of Science Research activities through the passage of the Department of Energy Science for the Future Act in the House last month. But to fully maximize our return on investment in the department's programs and facilities, we need to take the next step of ensuring that critical new technologies reach the marketplace. Only in the hands of the private sector can new innovations and discoveries truly fulfill their promise to ensure our energy security, protect our environment, and meaningfully impact the lives of our constituents. As we face unprecedented challenges such as threats to our energy independence from foreign adversaries and climate change, we cannot miss this opportunity to merge our tremendous federal resources with the incredible power of the private sector and the energy innovation community. Congress took a huge step with the passage of the Energy Act of 2020 at the end of the last Congress, authorizing the department's Office of Technology Transitions and a lab partnering services pilots program, among other things. Yet there's still more work to be done, and we cannot leave the job unfinished. As such, I was proud to join my colleague, Representative Ross, in introducing this bipartisan piece of legislation. The Energizing Technology Transfer Act authorizes programs to connect our energy innovation community with the resources needed to commercialize new energy technologies. For example, the legislation recognizes the incredible potential of our small businesses, authorizing a voucher program that facilitates their access to national laboratories and user facilities. The colleges and universities across my home state of Michigan are also crucial players in our vibrant technology development and innovation community, and this bill supports a number of opportunities for these institutions of higher education to collaborate with the department. The Lab Embedded Entrepreneurship Program, which connects entrepreneurial fellows with national laboratory expertise and facilities, authorizes national laboratories to partner with an institution of higher education. And it also fosters development of the next generation of innovators through the authorization of the Clean Energy Technology University Prize Competition Program. Red tape and bureaucracy are especially stifling for our federal agencies operating in cutting-edge spaces such as the energy technology commercialization ecosystem. And I'm proud to help lead this bill as it includes a number of common sense fixes and flexibilities to empower the DOE and our national laboratories to benefit from the knowledge of experts with experience in the private sector and forge new strategic partnerships. This bill will ensure better coordination and talent sharing between our federal resources and the private sector, setting us up for future generations for success and endless opportunities. At the same time, accountability and safeguards must accompany technology transfer activities to ensure our taxpayers get the most out of their contributions to our country's energy future. Our legislation requires the Secretary of Energy to coordinate technology transfer programs across all energy sectors and encourage information sharing in the development of best practices to promote efficiency among all of the department's energy transfer technology programs. Robust reporting requirements ensure congressional scrutiny and oversight of these technology programs, and I look forward to advancing this effort to secure our country's leadership in today's international energy economy. And I encourage my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Any further requests? Hearing none, then we will now proceed with the amendments in the order on the roster. The only amendment on the roster is the manager's amendment offered by myself, and the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1, amendment to HR 4606 offered by Ms. Johnson.
Ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection, so ordered, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. The amendment includes only small technical and conforming changes. I urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment. However, before I yield back, I want to recognize a committee staffer who is leaving us this week. It is with some sadness that I announce that our clerk, Kendra Wood, is leaving. Kendra has been a familiar presence at our markups and hearings, and I'm sure all of us are sorry to see her go. Fortunately, she is not going far. She will be soon moving across the street to take a new position with the House Clerk. Kendra, I wish you the best, and I look forward to seeing you on the floor.
Thank you.
We might hold it against you. I yield the balance of my time. Is there a discussion on this amendment? Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. I move to strike the last word.
You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to speak in favor of the manager's amendment and the underlying bill. The climate crisis affects our entire economy, and it will take our entire economy to address it. Our transition to a clean energy economy can drive new innovative industries and create good-paying, high-quality jobs for workers. Historically, federal investments have focused on the conceptual and early research stages, leaving valuable projects facing a commercialization valley of death. Transferring clean energy innovation from national laboratories to the marketplace is essential in our transition to a clean energy economy. Last year, I joined my colleagues on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis in releasing a comprehensive, bold, science-based climate action plan to reach net zero emissions no later than mid-century and net negative thereafter. Our plan includes provisions on the coordination of technology transfer programs and activities, and I'm pleased to support the Energizing Technology Transfer Act to advance these provisions today. I'd like to thank Representatives Ross and Meyer, Chairwoman Johnson, and Ranking Member Lucas for their leadership. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If no further discussion, a vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. If there's no further amendments, a reported quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 4606 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table, and I ask unanimous consent to be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplementary, minority, or additional views on the measure. We now will consider H.R. 4599, the Steel Upgrading Partnerships and Emissions Reduction Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 4599, a bill to strengthen and enhance the competitiveness of American manufacturing through the research and development of advanced technologies to reduce steelmaking emissions and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Anyone wish to be recognized to speak on this bill?
Madam Chair, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Gonzalez.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson and Ranking Member Lucas for holding this markup today. I urge all my colleagues to support my legislation, the Steel Upgrading Partnerships and Emissions Reduction Act, or SUPER Act. I'm not smart enough to come up with that acronym, so whoever did, thank you. I was proud to introduce this legislation alongside my friend, Mr. Lamb, and thank him for his leadership on this issue. Also, I want to thank the majority and minority staff for working with my team and also stakeholders, including Clear Path Foundation and the American Iron and Steel Institute for their support of this legislation. The SUPER Act directs the Department of Energy to establish a program that will further the research, development, demonstration, and commercial application of breakthrough tools, technologies, and methods for low emissions steel manufacturing to increase the competitiveness of U.S. industry and reduce emissions from both advanced and commercially available steelmaking processes. As we all know, a strong domestic steel industry is critical to our nation's infrastructure, national defense, and economy. While steel produced here in the U.S. is already among the cleanest in the world, our steel industry is under increased pressure to meet emissions reduction goals demanded by consumers and investors and remain competitive in foreign markets as countries weigh domestic subsidies and carbon border adjustments. The reality is that reducing emissions in the steel manufacturing process is vital to maintaining U.S. competitiveness and ensuring the nearly 2 million American jobs supported by the U.S. steel industry are protected. In order to ensure American leadership in steel manufacturing, we need to accelerate the development of advanced breakthrough technologies. The SUPER Act aims to do just that by stimulating more research on a range of key areas, including heat generation, carbon capture, smart manufacturing, resource efficiency, alternative materials, and high-performance computing. Finally, developing breakthrough technologies and bringing them to market will require an all-hands-on-deck approach. Greater public and private coordination, the bill directs the Secretary to coordinate with relevant programs or offices at the Department, other federal agencies such as NIST, and the network at Manufacturing USA. It also supports a demonstration initiative in collaboration with industry, universities, and DOE national labs. As I've said before at this committee, if we want to lead the way in reducing emissions while remaining the world's economic powerhouse, American innovation must be front and center in that debate. The Super Act does exactly that and is the right approach. Finally, Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record letters of support from both the American Iron and Steel Institute, ClearPath Foundation, Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions, and the Niskanen Center.
Without objection.
With that, Madam Chair, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 4599, and I yield back.
Thank you. Any further requests for time?
Madam Chair. Move to strike the last word.
The member is recognized.
I want to thank Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Lamb for this bill. As you all know, I spend most of my time here talking about climate. What you may not know is I spent a lot of my prior career in the steel industry because we were chasing projects to recover waste heat off steel mills. And if you have never been in an integrated steel mill in the United States, you don't fully understand the scope of what is possible in American manufacturing. Going through a blast furnace, spending some time at the largest coke oven battery in North America, I believe in the world, the SunCoke facility in Northern Indiana. They are remarkable operations. When I introduced my Clean Industrial Technology Act last year, it was in no small part because it frustrates me that my friends to the political left will put up their hand and say, I pledge to reduce emissions to zero by pick a year. And if you don't know how to make steel without metallurgical coke, that's like saying I'm going to eliminate the deficit without touching tax policy. You have to figure out how to do that. And I'm glad that that bill was approved, was signed into the law by the prior president. We're now trying to get it appropriated. And a part of the opportunity that I think this bill captures is to make sure that we continue to develop those technologies so that our steelmaking can be clean and efficient. The other part that I hope we'll also do, and I hope we can work with Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Lamb on this going forward, is that like any capital intensive low margin business, the steel industry more often than not does not deploy completely proven technologies that can save them money because they just don't have access to the capital. And I think there is a huge R&D challenge here that this bill addresses. It's an R&D and D challenge, and I look forward to working with my colleagues going forward on other opportunities to deploy the technologies that are already out there. But I thank you for this bill, support, encourage my colleagues to support, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Any requests for the time? Okay. We will then proceed with amendments in the order of the roster. The only amendment on the roster is a manager's amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio, and he's recognized to offer that amendment.
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1, amendment to H.R. 4599, offered by Mr. Gonzalez of Ohio.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with reading without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. This is a simple amendment, provides technical changes to this legislation and incorporates feedback from the American Iron and Steel Institute. Again, I want to thank my friend, Congressman Lamb. I want to thank Congressman Casson for his remarks and their staffs and Congressman Lamb's staff for working with me to incorporate these important changes. I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? The vote then occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. If there's no further amendments, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 4599 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill will be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table, and I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplementary, minority, or additional views to this measure. I want to thank all the members for being present and helping us to get through this bipartisan bill discussion and passing from the committee. Thanks to all of you for your efforts. And this concludes our markup, and the committee is adjourned.